United States started to look once more seriously into building a canal. One of the very popular, at least in the United States sites, was right up here. They wanted to go through Nicaragua. They wanted to use Lake Nicaragua because it was already a lake. It's halfway done for you. You just have to dredge it out a little bit and it'll serve, it pretty much built itself halfway. Another option, they had a couple of other options here that were all through Panama. They were looking very closely at. The problem with Nicaragua, as much as the Americans liked it was said to be very volcanically active. This is a rumor that got very, very strong at that time. And it was also said that there were no volcanoes in Panama. This is Philippe Bounovaria. He was one of the Frenchmen who had a lot of money invested in this Panama project. At this point, the new Panama Canal Company had two choices. They could sell the project, or they had to abandon it and lose all the millions of francs that they had actually invested into it. So Philippe really wanted the United States to buy this project out. Once everything came to a vote up in the Senate, it was down between Panama or Nicaragua. So Philippe sent all of the senators a letter, and in the letter he enclosed this stamp, a little Nicaragua stamp, 5 centavos. And in the letter he wrote the following words: an official proof of the volcanic activity of Nicaragua. Clever guy. So Panama Canal passed by 8 votes through the Senate. Once the route was decided, it was time to begin negotiations with Colombia for a concession to build a canal through the Colombian province of Panama. The resulting Hay-Hearn Treaty was made, but it was rejected by Colombia. Roosevelt was very annoyed, and he just wanted to get his canal built. So he quietly urged Panama to revolt, which they did. This is the United States quietly urging Panama to revolt, right there. Once Panama started revolting, somehow, by some very strange coincidence, all these U.S. warships just kind of turned up on the coast of Panama. This was to stop the Colombians from coming in and retaking the isthmus. They claimed what they said the excuse was that they wanted to protect U.S. interests in that railroad. Once Panama declared their independence, they quickly sent some representatives up to Washington, D.C. because they knew that the reason that they were getting U.S. protection was that they wanted this canal. So let's go ahead, let's put this together for you. Unfortunately for the Panamanians, Philippe was a little bit faster. He got to Washington first. He put together a treaty between Panama and the United States. So when the representatives got off their steamship in New York, they were handed a treaty that he had already written and signed for them. They were not exactly happy about it, but they really had no choice, so they went along with it and signed it as well. Part of that treaty was the creation of the Canal Zone. The Canal Zone was about 10 miles wide strip going right across the middle of Panama. The United States had complete control, complete power over this area. Construction for the United States began in May 1904, just 6 months after the Panamanian Revolution. It took about 3 years for the U.S. to decide on what type of canal to build. Should it be sea level or should it include locks? Everyone really wanted this sea level canal. I'm not sure why, but they just thought it was the best idea ever. But in the meantime, while they were trying to figure that out, they still had to cut down the Culebra cut. So this is kind of a map of what it actually ended up looking like. We are going to be coming down through here, through Limon Bay, and going through the Gatun Locks. Then we'll drop anchor somewhere in here. That's where you're going to get off, if you're going to be getting off for a shore excursion. Now this is the Chagres River, where they dammed it up. Damming up this river created this gigantic lake. And I think a lot of people kind of ignore this fact, but in making this lake, they had to forcibly relocate a ton of people. There were people who lived in villages and towns all over this area who they literally had to arrest and move out to get them to leave. If we were doing the entire transit, we would move way back down here through the Culebra Cut and through these locks right in here. When it was made, this was the #1 largest man-made lake in the world. Right now, I think that is about number 3 or 4, which is still fairly impressive. So once the Americans took over, they brought in Dr. William Gorgas. William Gorgas worked with somebody you may have heard of. His name was Dr. Walter Reed. He has a hospital in DC named after him. In Cuba, after the Spanish-American War, he's very highly specialized in tropical diseases. And they sent him down there because they realized if we don't solve this disease problem, this canal thing probably isn't going to happen. So the first chief engineer for the American project was John F. Wallace. He lasted in the job for just a year, and in June 1905, he was replaced by John Stevens. John Stevens was actually more of a railroad man, and he kind of took on this job more with a sense of patriotic duty than any professional interest. He told Roosevelt when he agreed to do this job that he would stay either until he had proven that it was impossible or until he had set things up so it would get done. And that, as we will see, is what he did. One of the things that he did as soon as he got down, and he took about a week off because he had horrific seasickness. It put him in bed for about a week after every time he was on the ship. One of the things that he did was he stopped work on building anything. He stopped work on actually building the canal. There was a lot of pressure coming from up north to make the dirt fly. People wanted to see this fantastic thing being built. But he realized that you can't build something this momentous with a pickaxe and a shovel. You really need to build the infrastructure around it. So he focused more on building communities for the actual workers. He focused on building railroads to actually move all of this stuff around, all of this dirt and rock that they were going to be moving around. So this is one of the original tent camps that they had. This is where people were living. I guess they're kind of nice because they are raised up off the ground, so you know when it's raining you're not going to get too wet. Still doesn't look the nicest though. And these are gallegos. Gallegos are people who came over from Spain to help work on the canal. They have them living in railway cars, which to me sounds terrible because you work all day in that hot sun, you come back to sleep in a wooden box with a tin roof that's been beaten on by the sun all day. Awful. So Stevens had things that were built a bit more like this. Let's notice something very specific about this. Look at that. There's screens on these windows and doors. That was all Gorgas. Gorgas brought those screens. And before I get into much more of this, I would like to suggest some further reading for you. I think that life in the canal zone must have been incredibly fascinating. So when you get back, it may be worth reading up a little bit about it. The canal zone wasn't like anywhere else because it was truly a dictatorship. There was no idea of democracy here. If the chief engineer didn't like you, you left. That was it. If he wanted you to live like this and do these things, you live like this and you do these things. Keep in mind that this is all being run by Americans very close in the era just after the Civil War times. There was a lot of segregation, so these men came down and they were able to pretty much build their ideal world. Look at these gentlemen. They're clearly black, living about probably 50 to 60 each in these houses. Let's take a look at what one of the white officers was living in. That's a single family home.
Oh.
Look at that. And what's really great, all of this netting, all of these screens, that's Gorgas. Now, one of the things that Stevens really wanted to do, they have a serious problem with attrition, especially with their higher level management. People would come down, see what a dump it was down there, make whatever money they needed, and leave immediately. So he tried to make things a little bit nicer. He started kind of fraternal organizations, especially for the white Americans who were down there, community centers, a lot of fun activities to make it more lively, things that made it more homey, so people would want to start families and bring their wives and their in-laws down to live with them. That meant that you have your wives, that means you have to build schools as well. The schools They had pretty decent schools down here, especially for the white children. The buildings were well made, the teachers were well trained, pretty good. This is a school for the black children. Much smaller, as you can see, much more overcrowded, and they generally made do with the leavings from the white schools. As shoddy as it is, unfortunately, this is a lot better than most of their laborers had any chance of getting back home. It's a post office, basic infrastructure, the Wi-Fi of the early 1900s. Police station, when you've got people from all over the world crammed in such uncomfortable quarters, things can get out of hand bad. There are a couple of riots that are pretty famous that happened here, so I think it was probably in the long term a good thing to bring in some rule of law down to the canal zone. So this is the part that I'm actually personally really fascinated by. Gorgas was one of the first people to realize that yellow fever and malaria was caused by mosquitoes. He conclusively proved it. He got a huge award for it. He came down thinking, great, I'm going to do some wonderful work. I'm going to save all these lives down in the Panama Canal. He was ready to set up, and everybody thought he was a crazy person. Mosquitoes spreading disease, no one had ever heard of that before. That was weird. That was strange. And they thought he was crazy. He ended up having to go all the way up to the President of the United States. It was Theodore Roosevelt himself who told Stevens, give that man what he needs. And he succeeded. He got rid of malaria and he got rid of the yellow fever. So it took some prodding by the United States government, but eventually they were able to start fumigating everybody's homes. At first, people didn't really like it, but then they realized that the mosquitoes were going, which are annoying even if you don't think they cause disease, and they would usually clean your house for you while they did it. One general who was down there actually tried to get them to paint his shutters while they were fumigating for him, which I think is, I mean, you're there, why not? So this is one of the drainage ways. They had to keep them clear, keep the water moving, don't let it sit. They would spray these horrifically strong chemicals, I'm sure whatever. And any standing water, cover it with oil. A lot of the time there's just too much water, you can't move it all, you can't drain it all, but they would have a lot of these oil wagons. They would go around, they would smother the larvae of the mosquitoes with oil. They also put in a lot of infrastructure. And it actually helped people's lives, made people's lives better. Clean water, better roads. They didn't do this out of the kindness of their heart, but because it would bite mosquitoes. One of the things that the people who lived down here used to do for water, they would leave these big open barrels to collect rainwater. That was where a lot of mosquitoes were actually growing. So to get the people to stop doing that, they actually really had to put in these water spigots, as well as good drainage facilities. Once things got better, they got the mosquitoes a bit more under control, people wanted to help. They realized people weren't getting sick as much, so they asked people to always get a kind of a big tray, fill it with fresh water, and leave it outside overnight. Because the kind of mosquitoes that spread yellow fever are incredibly picky. They're very picky about where they lay their eggs. They won't lay it in muddy water, filthy water. They want the cleanest, purest water that they can find. So if you would put that little tray outside overnight, you would wake up in the morning, come out, and then because there was so little standing water for those mosquitoes anymore, they would all come to those little trays. And you would look at the tray in the morning and it would almost be like a slushy full of eggs and larvae, just nasty. So once you had that, you just dumped it out in the hot sun, dried them up, dead, gone. So this is North Avenue in Panama City in June 1907. As you can see, filthy, open sewers, very nasty, not good. There was also a lot of dysentery, a lot of more common diseases at this time. Look at this 2 months later after they paved the roads. Exact same picture. Right? It's amazing what a little pavement can do. It looks so much nicer. So one of the things Dr. Gorgas did as well is he went into the hospitals. The hospitals were organized not by what was wrong with people, but by nationality. So they had Americans, Germans, Spanish, Barbadians, no matter where you came from, that's what your wing was in. Sounds kind of nice for the social aspect, but the problem with that is if you didn't have yellow fever or malaria when you came to the hospital, you definitely had it by the time that you left. So one of the things that they did was they started isolating people that had these diseases in these little kind of huts. That's to prevent the mosquitoes from getting the blood from you and passing it along to anyone else in the ward. So workers came from all over the world, but a large majority of them, for the American effort anyway, were from the West Indies. 20,000 came from Barbados alone. Now, they tended to arrive on a ship called the SS Ancon. Remember that name because you will see it later on in this presentation. About 2 years into the project, something that had never happened before occurred down in Panama. The sitting president of the United States left the country and came down to the Panama Canal. That had never happened before. They always stayed in the country. He wanted to see what his pet project looked like. He wanted to really get his hands into it. Teddy Roosevelt was one of those people who, if you've ever read about him, he was definitely an adventurer. So he came down in November. He came down in the rainy season. De Lesseps, the Frenchman who had spearheaded the earlier French movement, he came down to Panama Canal twice. The 2 times that he came in the dry season, when everything looked perfect, when things looked good, and I think that that's maybe part of the reason he's had such a disconnect. Teddy Roosevelt wanted to know what was actually going on. They would, your president comes in, you take them to dinners, you take them to lunches, dances, he'd be sitting at lunch, oh, let me go use the restroom. 2 hours later, they'd find him out back somewhere talking to some washerwoman trying to find out the real deal, what was really happening down in the Panama Canal. He was a very hands-on kind of guy. So his second day there were about, 3 inches of rain in 2 hours. He wanted to take a picture. He wanted to see everything. And he wanted to take a picture with these big steel shovels. This picture, when it was taken, was one of the most widely passed around pictures in the world. If you remember, if you happened to be around back then, or your family were, your parents were, you may have seen this picture before. It's one of the more famous pictures, historically speaking. So Teddy Roosevelt went home thinking, all right, things are getting better, things are ticking along very smoothly. Unfortunately for him, Chief Engineer John Stevens was not exactly happy, and he wrote a letter to Mr. Roosevelt to that effect. What the letter exactly said, nobody is really certain. Either way, Mr. Roosevelt took it as, I quit. So he had to hire somebody else. Before I move on to the somebody else, I do want to say something else about John Stevens. Because he really mechanized and industrialized the effort, he resisted the constant pressure to make the dirt fly and focused on infrastructure. I really feel like Stevens is really the one who made the machine that built the canal. And I kind of halfway think that he may have realized that as they shift focus from preparations to actually building the canal, that really wasn't his area of specialty, and he may have just realized it was his time to go. So Roosevelt didn't want to have to hire another chief engineer. So this time, he hired somebody who couldn't quit. He hired Major George Washington Goethals from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He took over the project in 1907. Work had been going on for almost 3 years, but it was still in its infancy and the major problems had not yet started. Another Army officer that came along with Goethals was Major David Gaillard. It's in his honor that the Culebra Cut was later renamed the Gaillard Cut. Work in the Gaillard Cut went on in earnest from 1907 until 1913. During these years, in addition to the daunting task of digging out millions of cubic yards of dirt and rock, Gaillard also faced the problem of dealing with the many landslides that occurred on a common basis. This is actually a really nice picture of a landslide. You can see the terracing. They did a lot of terracing, as you'll see when we go through, to try to prevent landslides from occurring. You can see it over here. You can see it off in the distance over there. And then you can see right here where things promptly fell to pieces. So this is one of the steam shovels that they actually use to move all of this dirt and rock and debris. Knocked right over, tons and tons of metal, knocked it over like it was nothing. So about half of all the workers who were employed with building the Panama Canal worked with dynamite. They were drilling down, they had to blow out a lot of this earth because they're literally moving mountains. Yeah, they were. While the Galliard Cut was being created, work was also being carried out to create the locks on either side of the isthmus. These would be stairways that would lift and lower ships between the ocean levels and the canal waterway. The canal waterway is going to be about 85 feet above sea level. These stairways weren't the first blocks ever built, but they were definitely the largest. The first concrete for the Panama Canal was put down in August 25th, 1908. When the concrete work was nearing construction, they began putting together those massive steel gates. They were fabricated in the United States, transported to Panama, and assembled in place. The lock gates at Miraflores are the largest in the canal. This is due to the extreme tidal fluctuations there. They each weigh over 700 tons. All of the gates are 7 feet thick, hollow, and airtight. With this design, they have a tendency to float in the water, so they need a little bit less power to move them. Finally, on October 10, 1913, President Woodrow Wilson pushed a telegraph key in Washington, D.C. This sent a signal to Panama to have a blast set off to allow water to flow into the Galliard Cut.
No.
4 days later, water flowed into Miraflores locks for the first time. The locks could now be tested and prepared for the first transit vessels. The first transit went to the SS Crystal Ball. It was just a tester, just to make sure everything worked well. This is also, if you recognize that date right there, 1914. What happened in 1914, class? World War I began, that's correct. And it's actually really interesting that World War I happened this year, because for a long time, this was kind of the biggest world news story that was going for about 30 years. When World War I happened, this entire project was pushed to the back page. The SS Ancon, that ship that brought all those Barbadian workers, 20,000 of them, back and forth over to go visit home and then back to work. That's the ship that eventually ended up opening the Panama Canal. Originally, they planned on having a whole military flotilla of ships from all over the world, all the different European nations, kind of showing a strong connection, comradeship, brotherhood, the fact that we're put war behind us, we're going to work together, we're going to make some money. Clearly, didn't quite work out that way. So it ended up that the SS Ancon, the ship that brought all those poor workers, who everybody took advantage of, that's the ship that got the glory on that day. So let's look at the total financial costs. The United States spent $352 million on the Panama Canal. And that sounds like a lot of money, but you should probably be aware that it's $23 million less than was budgeted for it. See, it's possible, right? France spent about $287 million. So the total cost was about $639 million. The loss of life, astronomical. And these numbers, they're very much estimates. Keep in mind that these numbers are pretty much based on records. So if you went out into the woods and you died of dysentery and the animals got to you, if you happened to get covered by mud and nobody noticed, your death didn't get counted in this. The total deaths, including the railroad, is going to be about 37,000 people. But look at what a difference that was for freight. Look at that, all the way down. And if you've ever taken one of those South American cruises, you know that's a long cruise. That's a long way, all the way down and back up. And now it's just bloop, bloop. A lot quicker and easier. The land divided, the world united. That's something that the transit authorities, the canal authorities, kind of said to themselves as they worked. They were working, all those people died in an effort to try to bring the world closer together. Yeah, a lot of people made a lot of money. That's definitely part of what happened. But it also brought us all a little bit closer together. So let's talk a little bit about tolls. The highest toll as of July 2016 was $829,000. A ship like this is going to cost about $300,000. And Richard Halliburton swam the length of canal in 1928 and paid 36 cents. All right, I have one more thing for you. If you would like to see a little bit of what it looks like to go through the canal, I have a little short video clip. It'll be super quick. A friend of mine filmed this a couple of weeks ago and was kind enough to share it with me. As you can see, we start early in the morning, head past the breakwaters. Now these two kind of towers over here, they're building a really big bridge. Make sure you get some nice pictures of that because it's pretty cool looking. To the left, that's the new canal. To the right, that little canal we passed is the original French attempt. Then we approach these locks. It's not going to be this fast, I promise. You'll get your money's worth. And we ease on up. Now, I do think it's really fun to watch it from the front of the ship, but don't stay in one place. Make sure you visit some of these upper forward decks as well as that wraparound deck on deck 3. Also, I mentioned this to my earlier group. If you're mobility impaired or you kind of need to just be seated, I also recommend aft deck, deck 9 by that sea view pool. And then we swing around, drop anchor. And if you're taking a shore excursion, this is the point at which you will start to freak out.